Good news, fellow humans, my computer is now fully operational and I have Final Cut 10. All shiny in the background there. Final Cut 10 is not the greatest program in the world. When it came out it was a bit of a joke, but when you've been running on a clapped out machine that wouldn't run any programs made in the last 10 years, it can seem like a miracle. So, I should be able to, I haven't worked out all the ins and outs, I haven't gone through everything that's available in it yet, but I should be able to do bigger and better stuff with it now. At very at least I can probably adjust the colour of my videos more simply. I should be able to get that up and running, familiarise myself with it over the next few days and start editing some short films and things together. But that is merely a side note of this video. I actually want to talk about board games because I'm going to start reviewing my collection. I'm probably going to just review it in alphabetical order because I can't think of any other way of doing it. But yeah, I'm going to start reviewing my collection because it's getting quite expensive now and I'd like to talk about it. But first off, I'd like to talk about board games just in general. Now, I've mentioned this before. I have a group of friends. There's maybe 9 or 10 of us, and we meet up somewhat sporadically to play games. We used to meet up to play Dungeons and Dragons style games, although we never played Dungeons and Dragons, I don't think. But I used to play up those sorts of games, but it became a bit too complicated to run a campaign of that sort of thing, and none of us could really be bothered to keep it going. And there was always new stuff coming out that we wanted to do. So that didn't really work out. We used to meet up and play when we were younger, play video games, but then video games don't really lend themselves to group play anymore. I know there's still stuff that it does, but there's sort of silly party games. But yeah, the games themselves just don't seem to lend themselves to that atmosphere. They've all gone online. We like to meet up in person and be social in some way. So board games popped up, and board games, I started collecting board games, and then now loads of my friends do, and that becomes our thing now. We meet up and we play a game or two. What, however, I think is interesting about board games is a very distinct difference. See, when I'm trying to explain collecting board games to other people and the games I have, odds are they very quickly have no idea what I'm talking about. There's a very distinct difference between the mass market and the collectors or the gamers games. And odds are, if you don't collect games yourself, you have no idea what a gamer's game is. And as probably maybe 1 or 2 games in my collection you will even have heard of. I'm serious. It's an entire different world that you have no idea about unless you're in it. And it's not like knowing that indie films exist or knowing that the sort of little quirky sci-fi novels and things exist. No, this is something that you probably didn't even know existed. This whole other world of board games. And Waterstones and stuff have started selling these games as they're growing in popularity, so you probably start seeing them about. But there's this massive world, and then you've no idea how many new games are produced a year. It's ridiculous. But it's interesting as it's comparable to film in my mind, that the mass market and the gamers games, the mass market is genuinely in board games the worst of the crop, and then the gamers games are vastly superior in almost every way. They really are. You might not like the gamers games. They might take to me a bit too complicated for you, but it's a genuine split. And that split, I know that a lot of us would like to, us film types would like to think that split exists in films, that the mass market, your kind of Fast and Furious and your Transformers and things are a pile of crap, and all the little indie stuff that you like is brilliant and amazing. But the fact is, that's more often than not, that's just not true. Those sorts of films are fun to watch, and it's just like the Matrix things all fit into that sort of mass market, and the Avengers and all this stuff. The mass market is genuinely very good and fun to watch. You might not like everything that's in it, but it's generally quite good. And the indie, you might like little, quirky or intelligent films, but more often than not, they are kind of crap. In fact, they're probably more frequently crap than the mass market is. And that's probably true in all elements where you'd like to think that you're smarter than everybody else for liking this little niche, but odds are your niche is quite tiny and this is actually significantly better. Not true with board games. Your mass market, your Monopolies, your Trivial Pursuits, your I can't even think, I don't play these games often, Cluedo. I can perhaps explain this in a comparable sense that whilst I enjoy a lot of indie cinema, I'm still going to go see Age of Ultron. I still appreciate that. Whereas with my board game group, as I say, we play all these games. I'm not going to say names because you won't have heard of any of them. But then we will never play a new version of Monopoly. You know, that's just not going to happen. My group of friends will never play those games. We will never meet up and say, let's play Monopoly or Cluedo. It would never even occur to us to do that, because those games are terrible by comparison. And it's very interesting to see that. It's really quite strange to have the mass market popular, the money makers, genuinely be the worst of the crop. So what makes that split? Why is the inferior more popular than the superiorly designed? Well, it's basically complexity. The mass market games are not complex. I don't care what you think. Monopoly is not a complex game. Mass market games tend to rely very much on luck. Luck is a big thing in mass market popular games, because popular games that are played with the family, they want games. People generally want games that they don't actually have to be good at anything to play. I think as a blanket rule, if you can buy it in Toys R Us, it's probably a bad game. Now that sounds argumentative, but the fundamental difference between the mass market and the sort of gamer culture is that the mass market has a significantly higher proportion of luck. You don't have to be particularly good at anything or know how to play in order to play a mass market game. Your Monopolies and your Cluedos and things are very reliant on the luck factor of rolling the dice or having the right whatever, and you can play them without, like I'm saying, without actually being good at anything. They don't have to be good at the game to play it. And there's no set strategy to win. Whereas with the gamers games, you're fitting much more into the strategic side. So luck becomes much less and less and less. And you're much more about strategy, about knowing the game, about knowing the ins and outs. And there is, you can know how to play and just basically just win all the time. That is an element, which can get annoying if you know that guy who does that, who can just sort of see round corners. But yeah, no, it's strategy versus luck, and luck is more popular because, as I say, it just doesn't require any skill. Now, there's trivia games tend to fit in here, and I'm not very good at trivia games because I don't generally hold a load of useless knowledge. I just don't have it. My brain's just not wired that way. But yeah, even trivia games, you don't have to be good at trivia. Knowing a lot of trivia isn't a useful skill. Knowing trivia doesn't count as being good at something. That's fundamentally the difference. Is that the better quality of the higher quality games are generally too complex for people, and that sounds shockingly arrogant. And it doesn't work in film, as I've said. More complex a film doesn't just automatically make it better, but the more complex a game, it does make it a superior game. It makes it. I mean, like you wouldn't say in video games, the simpler it is, the better it is. Simple games can be amazing, but I don't even think that. Wouldn't say that like what Angry Birds is comparable to Skyrim. I wouldn't even suggest that. You might prefer Angry Birds to Skyrim, but you cannot compare the two. And this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about complexity versus simplicity, and the complex board games don't seem to have found their way. And they slowly are getting more popular, or more not popular, but more into the public eye. Especially if you spend any amount of time on the internet and you know Geek and Sundry on YouTube are. But generally they're still kind of hidden away. And like I say, you probably don't even know that these games exist. I have a few games in my collection that people may have heard of, which do cross over. So I do have Ticket to Ride, which is essentially set collection and building trains across the board to try and create as many routes as possible. It's pretty simple, but it works really well. It is a fantastic game, and it's got a level of complexity enough that you feel like it matters what you're doing. There's not that much luck involved, other than the luck of what the other players are doing. But the other players don't do something that you want to do before you do it. So yeah, again, it's taking out the luck, but it's the luck of the card draw still. But yeah, and you can mitigate that because you can pick the cards and things like that. But that's a good example. Another good example I think is Power Grid, which has next to no luck in it at all. It's has one of the most boring themes, think of any game that I have. The theme is that you're building power plants across Germany. It was the American side of the board and the German side. You're building power plants and supplying electricity to Germany, which sounds thrilling, doesn't it? But no, it is a really good game. It's about money management, and you're building your little power plants and little houses and things. So I think it's probably the most comparable thing I have in my collection to Monopoly, in that it's sort of building and resource management and bidding. There's some auctioning and stuff going on. So that's really good. These basically the games that I'm saying here are the ones that I can get my parents to play, which we can play over like Christmas and stuff, from my collection, and then I get stuck playing all the games that I don't really want to play. But yeah, no, those two are good examples. Another example that is probably the most likely one people have heard of is Settlers of Catan. Settlers of Catan is a very popular game, and but it's on the low end of the gamers' games. There's a lot of gamers who won't play this. You know, this is slightly too simple or slightly too mass market, I guess, for some gamers. I personally still like it. It doesn't make its way into our games very often. But yeah, no, I still think it's a nice solid game. It comes with an absolutely terrible insert. There's got a plastic insert to hold the pieces that's like 2 inches shorter than the rest of the box, which is just ridiculously awful design. So basically, whenever you tip the box, everything falls out. It's just moronic. I really don't understand that at all. But yeah, no, a lot of people will be familiar with this game. It's quite popular. But as I say, it is on the low end. It is sort of in the barrier section in the middle between mass market and gamers, and there are gamers who will not play that game. But that's board games, and that's what I'm going to start reviewing. All of my collection. I have 48 games, I think. Double check that. I could do have a list somewhere because I'm nerdy like that, and I keep lists of everything. But yeah, no, that's something that I'm gonna start talking about in more detail. That was my update, my happy Final Cut 10 update and board game talk. And I hopefully, because a lot of people I talk, like I say, a lot of people I talk start talking to about board games, suddenly get blank looks very quickly because they haven't heard of anything I'm talking about, and they have no idea this little gaming culture exists. And I like introducing people to it, but it can be a bit much for people because, as I say, they get I keep saying as I say a lot. The games get more complicated very quickly, and often people just want to sit and roll some dice and see what happens, which is what a lot of board games are. A lot of mass market games are just roll a dice, see what happens, and that's so dull. Don't get me wrong, I used to play these games with my family when we were growing up. We migrated onto Risk, which is another game that I now wouldn't play, because I have significantly better examples on my shelves. But yeah, me and my brother particularly migrated onto Risk because it became it had a strategy to it. It was more of a challenge. But yeah, no, there's the games you roll the dice and move, and then that's all that you do. Literally all you do. Something happens on the space you move, and it's like, why are we? You kind of look back at it and think, why was that fun? That's all of that. I've whittled on probably long enough, so I will call it the end there. The end.